The cargo vessel Sanctuary drifted through the cold darkness of the nebula with smoke pouring from its damaged hull. The ship was dying, and everyone aboard knew it. Captain stood at the bridge and watched the warning lights flash red across every console. His translucent skin showed the rapid pulse of fear moving through his amphibian body. Behind him, his crew worked in desperate silence to keep the failing systems alive for just a few more hours. The attack had come without warning. One moment the Sanctuary was traveling peacefully through neutral space. The next moment, 6 black ships emerged from hyperspace and opened fire. The raiders were infamous across the galaxy. They took prisoners and sold them to the slave markets of the Outer Rim. They showed no mercy, and they never left witnesses. Turned to look at the main compartment below the bridge where his passengers huddled together in terror. 47 civilians had trusted him to deliver them safely to their new colony world. Merchants, farmers, engineers, and their families had paid for passage aboard his vessel. Among them were 12 younglings, children too small to understand why the adults were crying. The communications console crackled with static, and then the voice of the commander filled the bridge. It was a harsh sound, full of cruel amusement. "Vessel, you have no weapons and no shields. Your engines are dead. You will surrender your passengers to us within 1 hour, or we will breach your hull and take them by force. Any resistance will result in immediate execution of the younglings. Choose wisely." The transmission ended and silence fell over the bridge. His first officer, a young female named, looked at him with wide eyes filled with despair. "Captain, what do we do? The Council patrol is 3 days away. No one can reach us in time." Knew she was right. He had already calculated the distances and the response times. The Galactic Council maintained patrols throughout this region, but they were spread thin across thousands of light years. Help was too far away. His passengers would become slaves before anyone could save them. But he refused to surrender without trying everything possible. He moved to the communications console and began broadcasting on all frequencies. Every channel, every band, every signal he could generate went out into the void carrying his desperate plea for help. "This is Captain of the cargo vessel Sanctuary. We are under attack by raiders in the nebula. We have 47 civilians aboard, including 12 children. Our engines are disabled and life support is failing. Please, anyone who can hear this message, we need immediate assistance. Please help us." He repeated the message again and again while the minutes ticked away. The ships circled the Sanctuary like predators waiting for their prey to weaken. Could see them on the sensors, dark shapes against the purple clouds of the nebula. They were in no hurry. They knew their victims had nowhere to run. Suddenly straightened at her console, her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Captain, someone is responding." Rushed to her side and looked at the incoming transmission data. The frequency was unfamiliar. The signal encryption was unlike anything in the Council database, and when the voice came through the speakers, it spoke in a language that made his blood run cold. The words were harsh and clipped, efficient and direct. The universal translator processed them with a slight delay. "Sanctuary, this is the United Earth Navy vessel USS Valor. We are receiving your distress signal. Confirm your situation and provide your exact coordinates." Felt his heart skip several beats. Humans. The transmission was from humans. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy knew about humans. They came from a death world called Earth, a planet so hostile that it had forged them into something terrifying. They were predators in the truest sense of the word. Their bodies were designed for endurance hunting, for chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their history was written in blood and war. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times before finally reaching the stars. The Galactic Council had studied humanity for decades, and the reports were unanimous. Humans were dangerous. They were aggressive. They were unpredictable. Their capacity for violence exceeded any species the Council had ever encountered. Diplomatic advisories warned all member species to maintain careful distance from human vessels and human colonies. Had never seen a human in person. He had only heard the stories that travelers whispered in port stations. Stories of human soldiers who kept fighting after receiving wounds that would kill any other species. Stories of human ships that charged directly into enemy formations instead of maintaining safe distances. Stories of a species that seemed to have no natural fear response. And now, a human warship was responding to his distress call. Grabbed his arm with trembling fingers. "Captain, we cannot let them come here. The humans are more dangerous than who knows what they will do to us." Looked at his first officer and then looked at the passengers below. A young mother was holding her two children close, singing softly to keep them calm. An elderly merchant sat with his head in his hands, his life savings about to be taken along with his freedom. A teenage girl was trying to be brave for her younger siblings even though tears streamed down her face. The would enslave them all. The children would be separated from their parents and sold to the highest bidder. They would spend their lives in chains, worked until their bodies failed, and then discarded like broken tools. The humans might be predators. They might be everything the council warned about. But they had responded to his call for help. They had not responded to anything except their own greed. Made his decision. USS Valor, we are under attack by 6 raider vessels. We have 47 civilians aboard, including 12 younglings. Our engines and weapons are destroyed. Life support will fail within 4 hours. The raiders have demanded our surrender. Please, we need help. The response came after a pause that felt like forever. When the human voice spoke again, there was something in its tone that could not identify. It was hard and cold, but also somehow reassuring. "Sanctuary, this is Admiral Laura of the USS Valor. I have your coordinates locked. Hold your position and do not surrender to the raiders under any circumstances. Help is on the way. Do you understand? Help is on the way." Felt tears forming in his eyes. He did not know if the humans would save them or doom them. He did not know if he had made the right choice. But for the first time since the attack began, he felt something other than despair. He felt hope. "Understood, Admiral, we will hold. Thank you so much." The transmission ended and turned to face his crew. Their expressions showed the same mixture of fear and desperate hope that he felt in his own hearts. "We wait," he said quietly. "We wait and we pray that the stories about humans are wrong." Outside the viewport, the raiders continued their slow circle around the wounded ship. They did not know that something far more dangerous than themselves was coming. They did not know that they had made the worst mistake of their lives. They had attacked civilians in range of a human fleet. And humans did not ignore calls for help. Admiral Laura stood on the bridge of the USS Valor and studied the tactical display with calm gray eyes. The holographic image showed the nebula in perfect detail. 6 red markers indicated the positions of the raider vessels. 1 blue marker showed the damaged civilian ship, and 4 green markers represented her own battle group, hidden behind a small moon just outside sensor range. She was 53 years old and had served in the United Earth Navy for 31 of those years. She had fought in border skirmishes and pirate interdictions. She had led rescue operations and humanitarian missions. She had seen the best and worst that the galaxy had to offer, and she had learned one simple truth that guided every decision she made. When innocent people called for help, you answered. No exceptions, no excuses. Commander Jake approached her with a data pad in his hands. He was her executive officer, a tall man with dark skin and a shaved head that bore a thin scar from an old combat wound. He had served under her command for 7 years, and she trusted him completely. "Admiral, long-range sensors confirmed the situation. 6 raider vessels in standard hunting formation. They have disabled the civilian ship but have not begun boarding operations yet. It looks like they are waiting for the crew to surrender voluntarily." Laura nodded slowly. The preferred willing victims. It made the capture process easier and reduced damage to their merchandise. They would threaten and intimidate until the civilians gave up hope. What about our ships? Status report. Jake checked his data pad. The Valor is at full combat readiness. All weapons charged and shields at maximum. The USS Tempest reports the same. Captain Hayes says his crew is eager for action. He paused and allowed himself a small smile. His exact words were that his people are ready to show these slavers what happens when they pick the wrong neighborhood. Laura almost smiled at that. Was young and aggressive, but he was also one of the best destroyer captains in the fleet. Continue. The USS Nightfall is in stealth position behind the second moon. Lieutenant Commander Price reports all systems nominal. She is ready to begin the approach on your order. Jake scrolled through his data. And the USS Defiance has all 3 fighter squadrons prepped for launch. Wing Commander Chris Palmer says his pilots are running final checks and will be ready in 4 minutes. Laura looked at the tactical display again. 4 ships against 6 was not ideal odds for most species. The Galactic Council would never engage without at least a 2-to-1 advantage. They would wait for reinforcements, file reports, hold meetings, and debate the proper response while civilians were taken into slavery. Humans did not operate that way. Open a channel to all ships, she ordered. Channel open, Admiral. Laura straightened her shoulders and spoke in a voice that carried across 4 warships. All hands, this is Admiral. We have received a distress call from a civilian vessel carrying 47 people including 12 children. They are under attack by slavers and they have asked for our help. In approximately 6 minutes, we are going to provide that help. She paused to let her words sink in. Here is the plan. The Nightfall will initiate the attack with precision strikes on enemy engines. Once their formation breaks, the Defiance will launch all fighter squadrons to neutralize their weapon systems. The Tempest will provide cover fire and engage any ship that attempts to flee. The Valor will proceed directly to the civilian vessel and begin evacuation operations. Her voice hardened. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. These are slavers who prey on innocent families. They have chosen their profession knowing the consequences. Today they will answer for that choice. No warnings, no negotiations. We hit them hard and we hit them fast. Across the battle group, human crews prepared for combat. In the fighter bays of the Defiance, pilots climbed into their cockpits and ran through their checklists. On the Tempest, weapons officers locked targeting solutions and loaded torpedo tubes. On the Nightfall, the stealth systems hummed as the ship began its silent approach toward the enemy formation. Jake leaned closer to the Admiral. Ma'am, I should point out that we are operating in Council space without authorization. Technically speaking, this engagement could be considered an act of war. Laura turned to look at him with an expression that was part amusement and part cold determination. Commander, there are children on that ship, children who will be sold into slavery if we do not act. The Council can file whatever complaints they want after those children are safe. I will personally answer for any diplomatic consequences. Jake nodded. He had expected exactly that response. Understood, Admiral. For what it is worth, I think you are making the right call. I know I am. Laura turned back to the tactical display. Begin the operation. The USS Nightfall moved like a ghost through the darkness between stars. Its advanced stealth systems made it invisible to sensors, a shadow within shadows. Lieutenant Commander Price watched her screens with intense focus as her ship closed the distance to the formation. Was 34 years old and had grown up on a mining colony near the edge of human space. She had seen pirates and raiders attack her home when she was just a child. She remembered hiding in a basement while her parents fought to protect their community. That memory drove her to join the Navy, and it drove her now as she prepared to strike. Range to target, 1,000 kilometers. her tactical officer reported. "We have clean firing solutions on 2 enemy vessels." "Weapons lock confirmed. Awaiting your order, Commander." Took a deep breath. She thought about the civilians huddled in fear on the damaged cargo ship. She thought about the children who did not understand what was happening. She thought about her own childhood and the terror she had felt. Fire. The nightfall unleashed its payload in a single devastating burst. 4 precision missiles streaked through space faster than light, striking their targets before they even knew they were under attack. 2 raider ships lost their engines in spectacular explosions that lit up the nebula. On the USS Defiance, Wing Commander Chris Palmer watched the explosions on his display and smiled. "All squadrons launch. Let us show these slavers what human pilots can do." 48 strike fighters poured out of the carrier's launch bays like a swarm of angry hornets. They accelerated to combat speed and dove into the enemy formation with weapons blazing. The raiders tried to respond, but they were caught completely off guard. Their formations crumbled as they scattered in all directions. Captain Hayes brought the Tempest into the fight with guns firing. His destroyer closed to point-blank range against the largest raider ship, trading fire at distances that would have terrified any other species. "Keep hitting them," he ordered his crew. "Do not give them time to think. Do not give them time to run. We end this here and now." And through it all, the USS Valor advanced steadily toward the civilian vessel. Admiral stood at her command station and watched her crews do what they did best. Protect the innocent, punish the guilty. It was what humans had always done. And today, they were learning that lesson the hard way. 1,200 light-years away from the battle, the Galactic Council chamber was filled with representatives from 37 spacefaring civilizations. They sat in their designated seats arranged in a great circle, their attention fixed on the massive holographic display that dominated the center of the room. The display showed real-time footage from a Council observation satellite that happened to be monitoring the nebula. High Counselor watched the unfolding events with growing unease. He was an ancient being made of living crystal, his body catching the light and scattering it into rainbows across his section of the chamber. He had led the Council for over 200 years and had seen many strange things during his long tenure, but he had never seen anything quite like this. The emergency session had been called just minutes ago when the observation satellite detected weapons fire in a region that was supposed to be peaceful. Now every ambassador, diplomat, and representative sat in stunned silence as 4 human warships engaged 6 raiders. Ambassador of the leaned forward in his seat. His species resembled tall birds with bright blue feathers and sharp, intelligent eyes. He had always been one of the loudest voices against human membership in the Council. "This is madness," he said, his translator converting his chirping speech into common galactic standard. 4 ships against 6. The humans are outnumbered. They will be destroyed, and then the Council will be blamed for failing to warn them. Scholar, who sat in the observer section reserved for historians and academics, shook his ancient head. He was a small creature with gray skin and enormous eyes that held the wisdom of centuries of study. He had dedicated his entire career to understanding humanity, and he knew something that the politicians did not. "Watch carefully, Ambassador. You misunderstand the situation completely. They are the ones who should be afraid." Made a dismissive gesture with his wing. "Nonsense. The mathematics are clear. 6 vessels against 4 means the raiders have superior numbers. Even human aggression cannot overcome basic arithmetic." Said nothing more. He simply pointed one thin finger at the display. The first strikes came from the human stealth ship. It appeared behind the formation like a phantom emerging from nightmares. 2 raider vessels lost their engines in the span of 3 seconds. Before anyone in the Council chamber could react, the damaged ships were spinning helplessly through space, their crews screaming in panic over open communication channels. Then came the fighters. 48 small craft launched from the human carrier and swept into the remaining enemy ships like a plague of metallic insects. They moved with coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Each pilot knew exactly where they were and exactly what they would do next. They wove through defensive fire that would have shredded any other squadron and delivered their payloads with surgical precision. Counselor of the gasped in shock. His species were renowned warriors who had built an empire through military conquest before joining the council. They prided themselves on their combat prowess and tactical brilliance. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Those maneuvers would kill the pilots. The acceleration forces alone should have crushed their bodies." Scholar finally spoke again, his voice calm and measured. "Humans are endurance predators. Their bodies are designed to absorb punishment that would destroy other species. They can lose blood and keep fighting. They can break bones and keep moving. They can push themselves past every reasonable limit because their evolution demanded nothing less." He paused. "Their home world tried to kill them every day for millions of years. It made them into something that the galaxy has never seen before." The Council watched as the human destroyer engaged the largest raider at ranges so close they were almost touching. The two ships exchanged fire in a brutal display of violence that made several ambassadors turn away in horror. But the human ship kept advancing, absorbing hit after hit while returning fire with relentless accuracy. "Why do they not retreat?" demanded. "They are taking damage. Any sensible commander would withdraw and regroup." "Because humans do not think about survival the way we do," replied. "They think about victory. They think about protecting their own. They will accept any amount of pain if it means accomplishing their mission." High Counselor finally spoke. His crystalline voice rang through the chamber like chimes in a gentle wind. "How long has the battle been going?" An aide checked the chronometer, and his face went pale. 7 minutes, High Counselor." 7 minutes. In 7 minutes the humans had disabled half the enemy fleet and reduced the rest to desperate fleeing ships that were being hunted down one by one. The display showed the largest human vessel, the Valor, moving steadily toward the civilian cargo ship. It ignored the battle around it, trusting its companion vessels to protect its flanks. It moved with the confidence of a predator that knew nothing could stop it from reaching its prey. Except the Valor was not hunting prey. It was rescuing victims. Ambassador stood suddenly from his seat. His feathers were ruffled with agitation, and his voice came out in sharp, angry chirps. "This is exactly why humans cannot be trusted. Look at them. Look at the violence they unleash. They are destroying those ships without mercy. They did not even attempt negotiation. They simply attacked." "They attacked slavers," Scholar responded quietly. "Slavers who were about to kidnap 47 innocent people, including children. What would you have them do, Ambassador? Send a strongly worded message? File a formal protest?" Sputtered but had no response. The battle ended in the 11th minute. When the final vessel surrendered, the council chamber was completely silent. 4 raider ships were destroyed, reduced to scattered debris floating through the nebula. 2 more were captured, their crews prisoners of the human fleet. Not a single human ship had been lost. Not a single fighter had been destroyed. High Counselor stared at the display for a long moment. "Contact Admiral," he ordered. "We must speak with her immediately." But even as he gave the command, felt something he had not experienced in over a century. Something that his crystalline body should not have been capable of feeling. Fear. Not fear of what the humans would do to the Council. Fear of what it meant that such creatures existed in the galaxy. Fear of what would happen if humanity ever decided that the Council was their enemy instead of a distant neighbor. The humans had answered a distress call from strangers. They had risked their lives for people they had never met. They had fought without hesitation and won without mercy. And they had done it all in 11 minutes. Scholar watched the reactions of his fellow council members, and allowed himself a small, sad smile. He had tried to warn them for decades. He had written papers and given lectures and begged them to take humanity seriously. Now they were finally listening. Now they finally understood. Humans were not just another spacefaring species. They were something new, something that the galaxy had never encountered before, something that could be the greatest ally the Council had ever known or the most terrifying enemy it had ever faced. The choice of which one they would become was not up to humanity. It was up to the Council. And watching the fear in the eyes of his colleagues, wondered if they were wise enough to choose correctly. Captain stood in the main compartment of the sanctuary and watched the human shuttle approach through the damaged viewport. His hearts were beating so fast he thought they might burst through his chest. Around him, his passengers pressed together in fear. The younglings cried softly while their parents tried to comfort them with words that no one believed. The battle had been visible from their position. They had watched the human ships tear through the raiders like they were made of paper. They had seen explosions light up the nebula and debris scatter across space. They had heard the screaming of the crews over the open communications before those screams went silent forever. Now the predators were coming aboard. Grab's arm so tightly that her claws broke his skin. "Captain, what do we do? Should we hide the younglings? Should we try to fight?" Looked at his first officer and felt a strange calm settle over him. If the humans wanted to harm them, there was nothing they could do to stop it. They had no weapons and no strength left. Their only choice was to trust that the species who had answered their call for help was not planning to become their new captors. "We do nothing," he said quietly. "We stand here and we wait. They saved us from we must believe they did not do so just to enslave us themselves." The airlock hissed and cycled. The inner door began to open slowly, revealing armored figures on the other side. Felt his entire body tense as the first human stepped into the compartment. The human was female, her face partially visible through her helmet visor. She was shorter than had expected, but her body moved with a controlled power that reminded him of the hunting cats on his home world. She carried a weapon in her hands, and her eyes scanned the compartment with professional alertness. Behind her came more humans, 10 of them in total, all wearing the same dark armor with the insignia of the United Earth Navy on their shoulders. They spread out across the compartment in a formation that covered every angle and exit. The passengers whimpered and drew back. A young mother clutched her 2 children against her body and made a sound of pure terror. And then something happened that had not expected. The female human lowered her weapon and reached up to remove her helmet. Her face was young, perhaps 30 years by human standards, with brown skin and dark eyes that held something surprising. Not cruelty, not hunger. The eyes held concern. She looked at the young mother and her children. She looked at the elderly passengers and the frightened teenagers. She looked at the wounded crew members who had been injured during the attack. Then she knelt down in front of the 2 crying children and spoke in broken but gentle phrases of, "Safe now, no hurt, we help." The words were awkward and the pronunciation was terrible, but the meaning was clear and the tone was unmistakable. This human had learned phrases of their language specifically to comfort frightened civilians. The young mother stared at the armored soldier kneeling before her children. Her fear did not disappear, but confusion joined it on her face. "You speak our language." The human nodded. "Little learn for this, for help, you safe now. Bad ones gone, we take care." Lieutenant Ben Carter, the leader of the Marine platoon, approached Captain with his own helmet removed. He was tall and muscular with pale skin and short blonde hair. Old scars marked his hands and one crossed his left eyebrow. Everything about him screamed danger. But when he spoke, his voice was calm and professional. "Captain, I am Lieutenant Ben Carter of the United Earth Navy Marine Corps. Admiral has sent us to secure your vessel and ensure the safety of your passengers. We have medical teams standing by on the Valor, and we can begin evacuating your wounded immediately." Stared at the human and tried to process what was happening. "You are not going to hurt us." Carter's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. "No, Captain, we are not going to hurt you. We are here to help. That is why we came." "But why? We are not your species. We are not members of your alliance. The Council has refused humanity for decades. Why would you risk your lives for strangers?" Carter was silent for a moment. He seemed to be considering his answer carefully. "Because you needed help," he said finally. "Because there were children on your ship. Because doing the right thing does not require a treaty or a reward." He paused, and his voice became softer. "My grandmother used to say that the measure of a person is how they treat those who cannot do anything for them. I think that applies to nations too." Felt something shift inside his chest. All his life he had been taught to fear humans. The Council broadcasts warned about their violence and their predatory instincts. The diplomatic advisories urged caution and distance. Every story he had ever heard painted them as monsters barely capable of controlling their killer instincts. But the monster in front of him was talking about his grandmother. The predators around him were comforting crying children and asking about wounded crew members. The killers who had destroyed 6 ships in 11 minutes were now offering medical care and evacuation assistance. The female Marine, whose name tag read, was now sitting on the floor surrounded by younglings. She had produced some kind of small device from her pack and was showing them images that made them giggle despite their fear. An elderly passenger had collapsed from exhaustion, and 2 Marines were helping him to a seat while calling for a medic. Sergeant looked up at and smiled. "Captain, your younglings are very brave. They have been through much today. We will make sure they are safe and comfortable on the Valor. We have food and water and warm blankets. Everything will be okay." Felt tears forming in his eyes. He did not try to stop them. "Why?" he asked again, his voice breaking. "Why are you being so kind to us?" Smile faded into something more serious. "Because kindness is not weakness, Captain. Because protecting the innocent is what we are supposed to do. Because humans remember what it was like to be helpless and afraid." She reached out and put her armored hand on his shoulder with surprising gentleness. "The galaxy thinks we are monsters. Maybe they are right. But we are monsters who chose to protect instead of destroy. We are predators who hunt slavers instead of civilians." She stood up, and her voice became firm again. "Now please, Captain, let us help your people. Let us show you what humans really are when someone gives us a chance." Nodded slowly. He watched as his passengers were guided gently toward the airlock where the shuttle waited. He watched the Marines carry the wounded with careful hands. He watched Sergeant pick up a tired youngling and cradle the child against her armored chest while humming a soft tune. These were the predators the galaxy feared. These were the monsters the Council warned about. And they had just saved his people when no one else would. Did not know what to believe anymore. But as he followed his passengers toward the human shuttle, he knew one thing for certain. The stories he had been told about humans were incomplete. Very incomplete. The holographic image of Admiral Laura flickered to life in the center of the council chamber. She stood at attention on the bridge of the USS Valor, her gray uniform still bearing traces of dust from the combat operations. Her expression was calm and controlled, but there was steel in her eyes that made several ambassadors shift uncomfortably in their seats. High Counselor spoke first, his crystalline voice echoing through the vast chamber. "Admiral, you have conducted military operations within Council space without authorization. You have engaged in combat against vessels from a non-member species without Council approval. You have violated no fewer than 17 separate protocols governing interspecies military action in neutral territory." Laura's expression did not change. "High Counselor, with respect, I received a distress call from civilians under attack by slavers. My duty was clear. I acted accordingly. I would make the same decision again without hesitation." Ambassador rose from his seat, his blue feathers bristling with agitation. This is precisely why humanity remains outside the council. You act without consultation. You use violence as your first and only response. You are dangerous and unpredictable, and you refuse to acknowledge the authority of established galactic law. Laura turned her gaze to the ambassador. When she spoke, her voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it that had not been there before. Ambassador, let me be very clear about something. 47 people, including 12 children, are alive right now because we acted without waiting for permission. Your council patrol was 3 days away. Those civilians would have been sold into slavery, worked to death in mining colonies, or subjected to horrors I will not describe in this chamber. We did not ask permission because permission would have come too late. Sputtered in outrage. You cannot simply ignore the rules whenever you decide they are inconvenient. I can when the rules would result in innocent children being sold as property. Laura's voice hardened. You call us dangerous, Ambassador. Perhaps you are right, but I would rather be dangerous and save innocent lives than be civilized and watch them die. The chamber fell into uncomfortable silence. Many of the representatives looked at each other with uncertain expressions. Some seemed angry at the human's defiance. Others seemed troubled by her words. Scholar rose from the observer section and addressed the assembly. Perhaps the question we should be asking ourselves is not why humans acted, but why we did not. High Counselor turned toward the historian. Explain yourself, Scholar. Moved to the center of the floor where everyone could see him. We have known about the raiders for decades. We have issued warnings, filed protests, and debated economic sanctions. We have discussed the problem in committee meetings and published official statements of condemnation. Meanwhile, thousands of beings have been taken into slavery. Entire colony worlds have been emptied of their populations. He gestured toward the display, showing the rescued passengers being treated aboard the Valor. The humans encountered this situation for the first time and resolved it in 11 minutes. 11 minutes. They did not form a committee. They did not file a report. They did not wait for authorization. They simply acted. His voice became sharper. What does that say about them? And more importantly, what does it say about us? The silence stretched longer. High Counselor was about to respond when a new transmission was patched through to the chamber. The image of Captain appeared beside Admiral's hologram. The captain looked exhausted, but there was something new in his expression, something that looked like determination. Honored members of the Galactic Council, began, I request permission to address this assembly. Nodded slowly. Permission granted, Captain, speak. Took a deep breath. I was taught to fear humans. Every briefing I ever received warned me about their violence and their predatory nature. I was told they were dangerous and that contact with them should be avoided whenever possible. He paused. Today, those dangerous predators saved my crew, my passengers, and the children in my care. They asked nothing in return. They demanded no payment or political favors. They simply saw beings in need and acted. He turned to look at something off-screen, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Right now, a human soldier named is sitting in the medical bay of their ship. She has been there for 2 hours, holding the hand of a frightened child whose parents were killed by the before we escaped our home world. That child has no family left. He is alone in the universe, and a human predator is singing him lullabies so he can fall asleep feeling safe. Several ambassadors looked away, unable to meet the captain's eyes on the display. I am filing a formal petition requesting that the Council reconsider humanity's application for membership. Not because they are powerful, though they are. Not because they are dangerous, though they are that too. But because today they showed me what courage and compassion look like when they are combined. They showed me that being a predator does not mean being a monster. Straightened his shoulders. The Council has rejected humanity for decades because you fear what they might do. I am asking you to consider what they have already done. I am asking you to judge them by their actions, not by your assumptions. Admiral watched the Council's reaction through her holographic connection. She saw the confusion and uncertainty on faces that had been certain just minutes ago. She saw old beliefs crumbling under the weight of new evidence. Commander Jake leaned close to her and spoke quietly. "Think they will actually reconsider our membership, Admiral?" Laura shrugged slightly. "Honestly, Commander, I do not care. We did not save those people for political advantage. We saved them because it was the right thing to do. If the Council wants to reward that with membership, fine. If they want to condemn us for acting without permission, that is fine too. It does not change what we did or why we did it." She turned to face her crew. "Set course for home. Our work here is done." The USS Valor and her battle group began to move away from Council space. Their running lights faded into the darkness as they accelerated toward the distant stars of human territory. Behind them, they left rescued civilians being transported to safety. They left captured slavers who would face justice. They left a galaxy that would never quite see humanity the same way again. In the Council chamber, the debate continued long after the human ships departed. Some ambassadors argued that humanity was more dangerous than ever. Others suggested that perhaps the danger came from misunderstanding rather than malice. A few quietly admitted that they had misjudged an entire species based on fear instead of evidence. High Counselor watched the arguments unfold and felt the weight of centuries pressing down on his crystalline shoulders. He had led the Council through many crises. He had made decisions that shaped the fate of entire civilizations. Now he faced a choice that might be the most important of his long life. Humanity was everything the Council feared: violent, aggressive, unpredictable, but they were also everything the Council claimed to value: brave, compassionate, willing to sacrifice for strangers. The question was not whether humans were dangerous. The question was whether that danger could become protection instead of threat. The question was whether the Council was wise enough to recognize the difference. Outside the chamber windows, the stars burned eternal in the cold void of space. Somewhere among those stars, human ships carried rescued children to safety. Somewhere among those stars, the galaxy was changing. And nothing would ever be quite the same again.